Welcome to Cheat Masters, friends. If you don't mind, please subscribe to my channel. I have a dream of reaching 1,000 subscribers. Thank you. Now, let's dive into the story. It all started with a simple text message, innocuous on the surface. Hey, Alex, I think we should take a pause and reassess things. The words stared back at me from my phone screen, cold and detached. It was from Rachel, my wife of 6 years. My first instinct was confusion. She had never been the dramatic type. No screaming matches, no passive-aggressive comments. We were, or so I thought, the definition of a stable couple. Sure, we weren't perfect, but who is? When I called her to ask what she meant by pause, her voice was calm, almost eerily so. Just some space, Alex, she explained. I'm feeling overwhelmed and I need time to figure things out. I didn't argue. Instead, I offered support, even though her words gnawed at my gut. Maybe it was work stress. Rachel worked in marketing for a luxury lifestyle brand, a demanding job that often kept her late at the office. We were both in our mid-30s, careers humming along, childless by choice, living in a suburban house that could grace magazine spreads. If she needed a breather, I figured I could give her that. But then came the crack. The next day, my mother, of all people, called me. She didn't mince words. Alex, you need to look at Rachel's social media. I felt my stomach tighten. What? Why? Just look, she insisted. I hadn't thought to check her accounts. Rachel and I weren't the kind of couple who scrutinized each other's posts. Trust was supposed to be implicit. But when I opened Instagram, something didn't add up. Her posts didn't appear. I wasn't blocked. She was simply hiding her updates from me. My mother didn't stop there. She sent me screenshots, and my world flipped upside down. Rachel was in Cabo San Lucas, a beachside paradise we once talked about visiting together. But she wasn't alone. The man in the photos with her wasn't just any random guy. It was Ethan, her ex-boyfriend, the one she dated just before me. His arm rested casually around her shoulders in one picture, and in another, they were toasting cocktails by the ocean. The captions were vague, but infuriatingly smug. Sometimes you need to revisit the past to find clarity. My pulse pounded in my ears. I didn't call her, didn't text her, didn't even acknowledge what I'd seen. What was the point? The evidence was staring me in the face. Instead, I shut myself in my office and sat in silence. Anger, humiliation, and the dull ache of betrayal washed over me. Rachel returned home a week later, suitcase in hand, wearing a breezy sundress that screamed vacation. She smiled as if nothing had happened. Hi, Alex, she greeted me, breezing past to drop her bags by the stairs. I feel so much better. That break was just what I needed. I didn't respond immediately. I just stood there, watching her unpack souvenirs she probably bought with him. Eventually, I spoke. I know where you went. I know who you were with. Her reaction wasn't shock. It was annoyance. She sighed, running a hand through her sun-bleached hair. I told you I needed space, she said. You assumed it meant something else. That's not my fault. You went on vacation with your ex, Rachel. It's not like I cheated, she snapped. Her tone grew sharp. A pause means the rules are different. We weren't technically together. The mental gymnastics she performed to justify her actions were mind-boggling. I didn't argue. Instead, I calmly said, We're done. This marriage is over. For the first time, her mask slipped. What? Alex, don't be ridiculous. It was just a trip. You're blowing this out of proportion. I didn't stay to hear the rest. I left the room, and by the next morning, I was sitting with my lawyer drafting divorce papers. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Rachel's audacity didn't stop at her betrayal. When served with the papers, she tried to paint me as controlling, emotionally distant, and unreasonable. She even had the gall to demand alimony, claiming her career had suffered because she had prioritized supporting me. It was a blatant lie, and it fueled my resolve. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Well, I had decided mine was just beginning. Revenge, I knew, wasn't something to be rushed. It wouldn't be an outburst of emotion or a hasty retaliation. No, it would unfold methodically, with calculated precision. And it wouldn't just be Rachel who would face the fallout. Ethan would have his reckoning too. I wasn't interested in petty revenge or hollow gestures. If I was going to strike back, it had to matter. Rachel and Ethan thought they had buried their actions under the surface, but they had gravely underestimated me. Rachel, with her sense of superiority, never expected I would dig beneath the surface of her life. And Ethan, well, he had secrets that were practically begging to be exposed. The first step was to observe quietly. People often reveal more than they intend to if you simply give them enough time. Rachel was still employed at her high-end marketing firm, where her social media presence was a critical part of her professional image. She had crafted an identity of success, integrity, and aspiration, an image she worked hard to maintain. Ethan, on the other hand, was a self-proclaimed entrepreneur whose ventures were as vague as his sense of morality. I started with Ethan. A few discreet background checks uncovered a troubling pattern of lawsuits and financial struggles. He had scammed a handful of former clients, stiffed contractors on payments, and most recently had been involved in a shady business deal that had failed spectacularly. It was clear. Instability followed him wherever he went. Next, I turned my attention to Rachel. I didn't limit myself to her career. I examined everything: her work habits, her professional relationships, and her digital footprint. It didn't take long to uncover the hidden story she didn't want anyone to know. She had been siphoning off portions of our shared savings to fund personal indulgences, things that mysteriously disappeared from our joint budget. Even worse, she had been using her company's resources for personal favors, a direct violation of her contract. But I didn't confront her. Instead, I built my case. One evening, just a week before our divorce was finalized, Rachel came to collect some of her belongings. Her attitude was as insufferable as ever. "You'll regret this," she said, casually sipping the coffee I hadn't even offered her. "You think you're punishing me, but you're just being petty," she added, her words dripping with condescension. "Sure," I replied, keeping my expression impassive. She leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, as though she held all the power. "By the way, my lawyer says I'm entitled to half the house and alimony, so I hope you're ready to negotiate." I nodded, saying nothing. Inside, I was already playing out the steps of my plan. The divorce settlement would be the final act in my strategy. She thought she was walking away with a windfall, and Ethan likely expected a share of it too. But I had already set the stage to dismantle their little dream. The first blow came swiftly. The very next day, Ethan's shady business dealings caught up with him. A former contractor filed a lawsuit for unpaid wages. The timing was curious. How did the contractor suddenly manage to secure legal resources? Let's just say an anonymous benefactor covered the legal costs. Ethan's already fragile financial situation began to unravel. Next, I turned my focus to Rachel's career. Through a trusted contact in corporate compliance, I anonymously alerted her employer to her misuse of company resources. The company launched an internal investigation, uncovering enough evidence to terminate her contract. The termination wasn't immediate, but within weeks, Rachel found herself unemployed. Rachel called me after she lost her job. Her tone was a mixture of outrage and panic. "Do you know what happened? My company is accusing me of misconduct. They said they have evidence, but it's all a mistake." "Sounds rough," I replied, keeping my voice even. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." "You don't understand, Alex," she continued, her voice rising. "This could ruin me. If it's on my record, I'll never be able to work in the industry again." "I'm sure you'll find a way," I said, my voice cool and detached. Her frustration bubbled over. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? You think this is funny." I responded, my tone now razor-sharp. "Rachel, I warned you. Actions have consequences. You just didn't listen." That was the last time we spoke directly. The final piece of my plan concerned the house. Rachel had demanded her share, expecting that she could walk away with everything. Rachel had expected to walk away with half of everything. But what she didn't know was that I had already used her financial misconduct, her siphoning from our savings as leverage during the divorce proceedings. My lawyer, sharp as ever, highlighted how her actions had significantly devalued the marital assets. The judge sided with me completely, awarding her nothing, not a cent, not a single piece of property, and certainly no alimony. The ink was barely dry on the divorce papers before Rachel's carefully curated life came crashing down. Ethan, too, was now sinking under the weight of multiple lawsuits. Rachel's professional reputation had been irreparably tarnished, and I, having remained calm and composed throughout, walked away unscathed. The beauty of it was how effortlessly it all unfolded. They had built a house of lies, and all I did was push it over with a nudge. Once the divorce was finalized, I expected Rachel and Ethan to fade from my life. But people like them never really disappear quietly. A week later, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Ethan, his voice oozing with false bravado. "Alex, let's stop pretending. I know what you've been up to," he said. "You think you can just ruin people's lives and walk away? You don't scare me." I almost chuckled at his arrogance. "Ethan, if I really wanted to ruin your life, you wouldn't even be on the phone with me right now." There was a pause, and I could feel the simmering anger beneath his words. "You've made a huge mistake." "Did I?" I replied, my tone calm. "Let's make this crystal clear. You and Rachel did this to yourselves. You thought you could lie, manipulate, and cheat without consequences. But you underestimated me." With that, he hung up, but his call made one thing clear. I was far from finished. Both Rachel and Ethan were still clinging to the illusion that they had power, and that needed to end. The next phase of my plan was subtle but potent: social exposure. I knew how much they thrived on public approval. Rachel had always been obsessed with appearances, dinner parties, Instagram-worthy vacations, and designer clothes. Ethan wasn't much different, constantly looking to network with anyone who could boost his standing. Shattering their public images was the next logical step. I began with Rachel. Word about her firing was already circulating among her former colleagues, but I decided to push it further. I anonymously reached out to one of her colleagues who I knew had a penchant for gossip. A few carefully crafted emails provided just enough detail to make Rachel's misconduct the talk of her professional circle. It wasn't long before everyone knew she had been let go under a cloud of suspicion. Then it was Ethan's turn. His ongoing legal issues were already damaging his credibility, but I made sure to stoke the fire. I gathered all the details of his financial misdeeds and sent it anonymously to a journalist known for exposing fraud. The resulting article was a work of art, meticulously outlining Ethan's history of shady business dealings. The article went viral, and within days, his reputation within the entrepreneurial world was in tatters. What I hadn't anticipated, though, was the ripple effect. Rachel and Ethan had been flaunting their relationship on social media, and soon people started connecting the dots. Comments on their posts turned increasingly hostile. The narrative had shifted from them being a power couple to being opportunists, people who had manipulated others and burned bridges to get ahead. The backlash was swift and unforgiving. One evening, as I was scrolling through the storm of negativity on their profiles, I noticed Rachel had disabled comments and Ethan had gone completely silent. Part of me almost felt sorry for them, but that quickly gave way to a sense of justice. They had made their choices. All I had done was reveal the truth. The most satisfying moment, though, came when I least expected it. I was at a local cafe, enjoying a quiet afternoon, when I overheard a conversation from the next table. Two women were talking about Rachel. "Did you hear what happened to her?" one of them said. "She got fired, lost her house, and now she's living with that guy. What's his name? Ethan?" "Yeah," the other replied, "but I heard he's in trouble too." I couldn't help but smile, knowing that my plan had worked perfectly I kept my voice steady, though I was struggling with a mix of emotions. But that's the life you chose, Rachel. You were a part of that. She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I know, and I regret it. I was stupid. I see that now. I thought I could fix everything, but I was wrong. I used people. I used you. It was painful to hear her admit it, but I wasn't moved by the apology. There was no turning back. What do you expect from me? I asked, my patience running thin. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, she said, voice shaking. I need help. I have nothing left, Alex. I don't know what to do. For a long moment I sat there, considering her words. She looked so different, so far removed from the woman I had known. But I knew better than to let that cloud my judgment. Rachel had burned so many bridges, and now, when the fire had died down, she was looking for someone to pick up the pieces. You made your choices, I said, my voice colder than I intended. And now you have to face the consequences. Her face fell, and I could see the weight of her reality hitting her. Please, she whispered. I'm not asking for your help in the way I used to. I don't want anything from you. I just need someone to talk to. There was a long silence between us. She wasn't the person I once thought she was, but I had nothing left to prove by being cruel. Still, I knew this conversation would never change anything. The past was done, and we were both living in the aftermath of our choices. I'm sorry you're struggling, Rachel, I said finally, but my tone remained firm. But I can't help you. You have to figure this out on your own. She nodded, the tears in her eyes reflecting a pain that was all her own. As she stood up to leave, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. Watching her walk away, I realized that chapter was finally closed. I didn't need to carry the weight of her actions anymore. She was on her own now, and for the first time in years, I felt completely free. No more ties, no more regrets. I had rebuilt my life, step by step. Clara and I were happy, and my career had flourished in ways I had never anticipated. I lived in a house that was truly mine, a space untouched by the past. My future was no longer clouded by betrayal or lies. It was clear and full of possibilities. And in that moment, as Rachel's figure disappeared into the distance, I knew I had made the right choice all along. Her face was a mask of vulnerability, but I couldn't let that sway me. What does this have to do with me? I asked, my voice steady despite the swirl of emotions inside. She met my gaze, her eyes filled with desperation. I don't have anyone else, Alex, she said softly. My friends, they've all turned away. Please, I just need a little help to get back on my feet. The words were out before she could finish. No, I said firmly. Her face immediately fell, the weight of my rejection hitting her hard. Alex, please, she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I don't deserve it, but I couldn't let her continue. You made your choices, Rachel. You betrayed me. You lied to me. You tried to take things that weren't yours. Now you're living with the fallout. She flinched, as though I'd struck her. I was wrong, okay, she said quietly. I see that now. But you aren't perfect either. You didn't fight for us, Alex. You just walked away. I leaned in, meeting her eyes. There was nothing left to fight for, I said, my tone colder. You threw it all away when you decided that taking a pause meant giving yourself a free pass to betray me. I moved on, Rachel. You should too. For a long moment, she sat there, stunned. Then, her shoulders slumped. Tears welled in her eyes. I guess I had that coming, she whispered. Yes, I said simply. I stood up, leaving a few bills on the table to cover my coffee. As I walked out, I felt no remorse, no lingering sadness, only a sense of relief. Rachel was no longer my problem. Her chapter in my life had truly closed. What happened to her after that, I couldn't say. Maybe she rebuilt her life. Maybe she didn't. It wasn't something I needed to know anymore. As for Ethan, his fall from grace continued. The lawsuits against him kept piling up, and whispers began to circulate that he had fled the country to escape creditors. Occasionally, I'd hear snippets of his downfall, and each reminder served as a small satisfaction. Karma had a way of catching up with people, no matter how slippery they thought they were. Life moved forward. Clara and I built something real, something founded on mutual respect and trust. Every time I looked at her, I was reminded of the strength it had taken to walk away from the wreckage Rachel had left behind. Revenge had served its purpose, but the greatest victory wasn't in retaliation. It was in reclaiming my life, learning from the past, and living better than I ever had before. Thank you, friends.